We've come a long way from the cardboard credit cards of yesteryear, from cardboard to plastic, to metal, intangible numbers that belong to the cloud, chips that we tap and wave and enter into the intersphere. Credit and credit cards are not a new concept. We've been doing it for thousands of years. But why is building credit for your business still such a murky subject? And why is it so different to build business credit over personal credit? We're going to dive into the world of credit and credit cards. You'll learn how to build credit for your company and how it differs from building your own FICO score. Welcome to our show, The Business Behind Small Business. In every episode, we dive into one area of what you need to build a lasting business. We start our show by peeking behind the curtains of someone else's success and then drill down to how you can apply it to your own business. We are your hosts, Sevana Stone and
Tiffany Ko.
No one gets to $1 million without getting a little dirty. There's a lot of business behind small business, so let's get to it. The idea of credit cards, owning them, collecting them, and the overall idea of credit is really just a fancy IOU that, as I mentioned, began thousands of years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. There have been clay tablets found with inscriptions on them from that time period that show transactions between neighboring merchants from Harappa and Mesopotamians as agreements for buying things and then repaying them later. Fast forward to the days of the Old West in the United States. Merchants would issue goods to farmers and ranchers and use metal coins or small plates as a receipt of the loan for the supplies. Crops were harvested and livestock were sold, and these loans would then be repaid by the merchants. Lewis Tappan and his brother Benjamin Tappan, along with their father, were one of these many merchants. Once Lewis was old enough to work, he began helping out in his father's dry goods store. By the age of 16 in 1804, he had begun to explore other areas of commerce. At the age of 38, he entered into a silk partnership with his brother Arthur. The Panic of 1837 led to a 6-year depression and the failure of several businesses. Lewis Tappan believed something had to be done, so he worked on establishing the first credit agency. Tappan was a New York abolitionist who had dedicated his life to freeing enslaved Africans aboard the Amistad. He and his brother were also the founders, or two of the founders, of the American Missionary Association in 1846, which established over 100 anti-slavery churches through the Midwest. The men were constant targets of hatred for what they did, but the two of them secured legal assistance and acquittal for Africans in cases that were reaching the United States Supreme Court. Both men were fascinating, along with their father, who is also an abolitionist, and there's a lot of great articles on them, but I digress. The way it functioned, because there's so much to say about them, but that's not the point of today's show.
The point of today's show.
Yes, the way it functioned was a bit like today's credit reporting agencies, where they would collect information that was entered into a ledger system that was centralized in New York City. Now, these ledgers would rate the company's ability to pay their debts and were published for the public in a series of guides. So basically, if you were known for not paying your debts, these guides would call you out publicly, so you couldn't just go to the town next door and do the same to the people there. In 1840,
Shameless.
to encourage expansion, Tappan turned the agency over to Benjamin Douglas, who was a former clerk for the company. According to a timeline published on altairs.com, quote, Douglas took advantage of the improved transportation and communication of his day by expanding his network of offices, which allowed the agency to offer both new clients and excellent information. Some of those correspondents, fun fact of the day, some of those correspondents even went on to become presidents. One of those was Abraham Lincoln. Another was Ulysses S. Grant. Another was Grover Cleveland and William McKinley. Pretty cool, huh?
Quite a few presidents.
In 1859, Douglas turned the agency over to his brother-in-law, Robert Graham Dunn. Dunn was a financier, and in 1861, he opened a credit rating firm, R.G. Dunn and Company. with many branches across the nation. His company was one of the first to use office machinery, including the new fandangled typewriter, according to an article published on altiers.com. On this machine, he wrote his weekly Duns Review, assessing the international business condition. At this time, a rival, John M. Bradstreet, had entered the game and was expanding as quickly as Dunn & Company. Before long, the two were the largest credit reporting agencies in the country, and by 1933, the two companies knew it would be in their best interest to merge, and so they formed Dun & Bradstreet. So if you, like me, have wondered if these humongous companies actually go all the way down to a real person, Dun & Bradstreet do. By the 1950s, to issue credit to customers, charge plates were being popularized by department stores. These dog tag style metal plates were being used between the 30s and the 50s to issue credit to customers, but they were still individualized to each store. There was no way to centralize them. Frank McNamara was dining with clients at the Major's Cabin Grill restaurant in New York City in 1949 when he realized he had left his wallet in another suit jacket. In a panic, he called his wife to come down to the restaurant to pay the bill. This sparked an idea in McNamara, and he got to working. He thought there should be a way to avoid this kind of situation, so he discussed his idea with the restaurant owner, and then he had a conversation with his lawyer, and then his friend, Alfred Bloomingdale. I'm just name tossing all over the place today.
Name dropping.
Yes. A few months later, he returned to the restaurant with a cardboard charge card and a signature. And that meal infamously was to be known as the First Supper and is credited as the beginning of the contemporary credit and contemporary credit card. Credit reporting, however, did take a little longer to consolidate. It wasn't until the 1990s where there were more than 2,000 credit bureaus across the U.S., and over the course of the next 20 years, that number would eventually scale down to 5, and then eventually to the 3 major credit bureaus we have today. Credit scores had a little bit of a more nuanced journey. FICO was founded in 1956 and originally worked with business clients to build credit scoring models specific to that company. So like your company could build a credit score specific to the clients that you had. Customer files were used to produce an individualized model, and that would be used to calculate the risk level of its customers, according to an article in CNBC.com. It wasn't until 1989, like we were alive then, when FICO worked with the National Credit Bureau to create a model that could be used to evaluate all consumers in a generalized way. And this is where the score was born. By the mid-90s, the FICO scores were becoming a huge part of the financial decision-making process as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac started requiring mortgage applicants to begin submitting them. And one more tidbit, it used to be that they would judge you on your character as much as they would judge you on what you had to offer on paper, meaning your how much money you made, how much debt you had. They also judged you by how many times had you been married, how many homes had you lived in.
Oh my gosh.
How many people had you smited? It was
How does somebody do that objectively?
It's not really an objective thing, because if we go all the way back to where I mentioned Abraham Lincoln and all of them, what they did was that they did field research. So they would go out, on the railway to wherever it was, say Utah, and go to the local town and ask those people, hey, how many patrons do you have? Okay, give me the list of patrons you have. Okay, out of these patrons, which ones come the most? Which ones patronize your business the most? Okay, so these 10 people patronize your company the most. Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? Which ones are the ones that give you the hardest time? Which ones are the ones that try to nickel and dime you? So, yeah. And then those names would end up in those books, those ledgers, those research guides, those ones that got distributed, published and distributed by Dunn. And so if you were somebody that was hard to work with, your name was on that list. And let's say
it's now like the Google reviews of today.
Google reviewing people. not companies.
Basically, yeah, it's like the
Yeah,
Google reviews of
it
today.
really is. It really is. And so like if you had not a great reputation, you had a reputation of say nickel and diming and then taking a long time to pay, and you go to some place in Texas that happens to have that book and they see your
Hmm.
name in there, they may refuse you
Hmm.
service.
Go is individually. Well, actually, it sounds like right now in the story, or in history, they are also business based as well as
Yes.
individually based.
Right.
So it's personal and
Right.
business credit they were dealing with. Yeah, which is not the
Right.
same as today.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
And you are going to tell us all about
yeah. There's no FICO.
it.
Not on a business credit. There isn't. It would make things simpler though if the business credit and personal credit were done somewhat similar to one another. But
Well, why make things simple? Simple. Ha ha ha. I laugh in your face. Yeah, so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And now it's your
okay.
turn to tell us the truth behind credit scores.
Well, I think the idea is, we wanted to share the history of credit scores because it is kind of amazing how it came about. And the purpose of why it originated is pretty much the same purpose as today, even though the functionality and the mechanisms in which it's used to measure you as a business is different. Today, there is a separation between business and personal credit. So it sounds like back in the day, they kind of intertwined all of it as far as even judging your character. Oh gosh, I can't imagine if they did that today. Like your business credit is based on your business as well as your character, how far that's going to go.
Hmm.
But now there is a separation, meaning that most people who are much more familiar with their personal credit just know that when we talk about business credit, it is not the same. The same rules do not apply in this game. So that being said, the biggest first difference is that when we think about personal credit, we always think about the three major credit bureaus. We have TransUnion, we have Equifax, and we have Experian.
Hmm.
In the business world, the three big credit bureaus for the business credit is Duns and Bradstreet, which now we understand are real humans at one point,
Yeah.
named after real humans. Duns and Bradstreet, Equifax, and then Experian. So now, how you earn credit for each of those credit bureaus is also not like your personal credit. So in a personal credit, we go out and we take on debt and we have credit cards. All this automatically reports to your personal credit score. In a business credit, not every vendor reports to your business credit bureau, which means that if you have a business and you go out and take a credit card, most credit cards don't report to the credit bureau unless you miss a payment. If you miss a
Not at all.
payment, they'll definitely tell the credit bureau that you're a delinquent. But if you don't miss a payment, you actually don't get points essentially for making your payments on time.
Hmm.
To most of these major credit cards. So, that approach of building your credit, while it works for the individual side, doesn't work at all for the business credit scores. Now, what does work is being able to find the vendors and working with vendors that will, one, extend you a trade line, meaning that they'll be willing to extend you some kind of account, some kind of credit account, so you don't have to pay things back until another 20 to 30 days in after you make the purchase. You have to find one of those vendors that actually report to one of those three main credit bureaus we just named. Now, the tricky part is not every vendor advertises the fact that they report to the credit bureaus, and
Yeah.
they don't report to every single one.
Yeah, this was the most surprising to me as to who does and who doesn't, because I've clearly been buying my things from the wrong one.
And you think you're
Yeah.
building all this credit, and you're really not building anything. I called Duns and Bradstreet and I kind of questioned the rep I was talking to just to understand how all this works. And funny enough, when I said, well, I mean, wouldn't Duns and Bradstreet just know like the list of vendors that report to it? I mean, isn't that something that you would want to share? And they're like, no, we actually can't share that information. I'm like, so you can't tell me who reports to you, but they won't tell me either. So am I just guessing? Like, how do I build my business
Exactly.
credit if I don't even know who's
Yes.
involved and who are the players of this game? Now, unlike your personal credit, where you can just go online to each of the TransUnion, Experian, Equifax, and you log in and you have a free account and you can constantly see your credit score. You can't with any of these business bureaus. In fact, you have to pay in order to actually see your credit score.
That's
And
insane.
period. There is no exception to that. There is no free peek to it. You actually have to pay to see where you currently stand. And
That's insane.
so, I'll let you determine how you feel about that. So basically, you almost have to pay to play, right? So if you're on a track where you're intentionally trying to build your business credit, you already have to put in some money in order to see the credit score so you can actually monitor. Why does it even matter at the end of the day? Like, why does it matter that you have a credit score? Now, for a lot of businesses, like for me, for many years, I never knew about this concept of a business credit score. I just thought that if I've been in business for some time, I'm making good profit, I'm filing my taxes. I mean, I must have good business credit. In fact, I had zero business credit. I didn't have good or bad. I just had none because I had nothing reporting to any of these credit bureaus. When you want to go and get a loan from the bank, or you want to get a vendor to be able to extend your credit, especially if you're in an industry where you have to buy inventory, these kind of vendors all look at your business credit score. And if you have zero credit and you have no credit or bad credit, so no credit or bad credit, obviously they're not going to extend to you. So that's why it's so important for you to be aware of what your business credit is, even in the beginning, just so that you have that built up. So if and when you need credit extended to you, you're not scrambling, because the one thing is the credit score builds up over time. This is not something you can do overnight. You have to take at least 6 months to be able to build up your credit score. A lot of times, the trade lines won't even report to your business credit bureau until you've been buying from them for like 3 months.
Well, you'll get to it. And if you don't get to it, then I'll bring it up. But yeah, okay. Like who reports?
Okay. Who reports, right? Okay. So I'll tell you what I did to be able to build up the credit in my business. And I will say it did take 6 solid months. And that's with intentional reviewing and trying to make sure I'm tracking where things are being reported and how well. There are services out there that allows you to track all your business credit for a fee. So for a fee, one of the more well known services that does that is called Nav. So nav.com. They extend to you a checking account as well as a credit card account. And there's a monthly fee of, I believe now, it's approximately $50 a month. And so to buy that fee in, you get basically a monthly reporting to all 3 of the major credit bureaus. And so that fee itself generates what they call like one trade line that reports to the credit bureaus. And then as you have your credit card usage, the credit card also reports. So I hate to use the word trick, but one strategy that I ended up using is that I went to another vendor that also reports, which is Bill from Bill.com. So Bill has a credit card as well for all your expenses and things like that. They're known for like your expense report and how easy it is, and you can get a business credit card with Bill. And Bill reports to 2 credit bureaus. I believe it's Duns Bradstreet and Equifax, I want to say. So they report to 2 credit bureaus. And then so what you do is you put the NAV monthly fee on your Bill credit card. And that way you get an automatic expense that generates credit reporting to the bureaus.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And then the rest of the way to do it is to find vendors that have openly said that, hey, we report to these credit bureaus. Now, I will say that I've looked at all the vendors, and most of them require some kind of fee, or some of them require you to be in business for a certain amount of time. But some of the vendors also require you to have personal guarantees. And when you apply for credit, they sometimes will do pulls, if not hard pulls, on your personal credit. So you just want to be careful of that too, because every pull kind of dings your personal credit. You might want to not do too many of those. But there are some vendors, like I've used Home Depot, which is a great one. Assuming that you're in that line of work, right? I mean, if you're not going to be able to use Home Depot for your business, it may not actually make sense. But Home Depot is one of them. There's a couple office supply stores that also reports to the credit bureaus. Staples being one of them. Office Depot also does that. There is Granger, which is another large, supply store. And then there's this one called The Creatives, which again just sells like miscellaneous stuff. That I think requires an actual minimum, if not a monthly fee, in order to be part of that vendor reporting your expenses. I know, fun, right? There is a vendor called Shirtsy that does swag, business swag. So,
Ooh.
again, if it's something that your business can already utilize, obviously that's the best way to go. There is a monthly membership fee, of course, in order to participate. Yes. But, if you're going to spend what you're going to spend and you can get it to report to the credit bureaus and build your credit, it may be very much worthwhile. In that case. So, if you go ahead and Google, those are probably the vendors that comes up the most and they're most well known for being able to actually report to the credit bureaus. But mind the fees.
Yeah. And I thought it was fascinating that Amazon is not one of them, right?
No.
Yeah. Isn't that's so crazy to
Not
me.
Amazon business either. So
No. And I buy like nearly
no.
all of my supplies from Amazon Business. So that was shocking.
Yeah. So I think the hard part is also just kind of balancing it all, because you almost need to remember to, buy things from a certain store and trade line and do it often enough, right? It's not a once and you're done. It's you kind of have to buy it continuously. So, you're building up this credibility in with these credit bureaus so that somebody goes and pulls your credit. They see that you're consistent, you're paying things back on time,
Right.
because all three credit bureaus kind of measures things a slightly different in kind of their own way. But at the end of the day are you credible enough to be able to extend any kind of credit to? Are you
Right.
paying your bills on time? Are you going to be able to pay your bills on time? I don't know about your character, but certainly I feel like it speaks to the business character.
Right.
Like as a business, have you filed for bankruptcy? Have you, made late payments to your supplier once or twice? And you get dinged really fast if you're late to your supplier, especially if your supplier reports, assuming you
Right.
know that they report. And there are little things too that's different too. Like in the business credit building world, you think that paying your bill on time is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but paying your bill 10 days prior to your due date is actually a better thing.
Better thing. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So if you're one of those people who, like me, are a set it and forget it, typically I have things on auto pay because I
Yeah,
hate
me
being
too.
late and things
Yeah.
like that. In this case, I have to be cognizant to always go in and try to pay the bill early to make sure that, we get that extra brownie point for doing it right. So anyways, there's business credit in a nutshell.
I never ever would. So what are your recommendations for a company, say like mine, where I have no overhead? I don't have things to buy. We're
Yeah.
service based and
Mm-hmm.
all that service is,
Yeah.
So what are your
Yeah.
suggestions for a company like mine that has zero overhead?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, right? You can do some office supplies, right? If you can to do that. The other thing you can think about is vendors like the business swag and things like that, because hey, maybe you don't do it today, but if you feel like that credit is worthy enough to build, maybe you do start getting some swag to hand out to your clients. And that's some way to build it in. The third way is that I believe it's Duns Bradstreet actually gives you some credit for uploading your financial statements in there to show them
Oh,
that you're a viable business.
well, that's interesting.
So that's one way to do it as well. Now, Duns and Bradstreet, I feel like, has a lot of it behind a paywall. So as long as you're willing to pay the fees that Dun and Bradstreet has, you'll be able to. And then they'll also tell you kind of like what's the best way to build credit with them. As long as you're willing to pay to play, they'll definitely tell you kind of how to do it over time. But financial report is one of them.
So interesting how they have this pay to play for your business, but not for you as on a personal note. Like if you're one person who owns a business and personal, like your personal is being done this way, but your business is being done that way. Like it can be so confusing. It's almost built to make you fail.
Well, we would like to be optimistic,
I'm
right?
going to be optimistic, but on the other
yes.
hand, it's like, good heavens, like how can you ever keep that track of that?
Yeah. And, and that stuff comes into play too. Like I know that most recently I was working with a client who was looking to acquire a business and was a business in trade. And one of the things that they looked at was what is the business credit of the company they're acquiring? Because if they have good credit and good standing, then they know that they have more flexibility with the vendors for inventory, which is, something that is a real cost to the business.
Wouldn't it be great to hear the sound of us promoting your business for you right here on our show? Of course it would. You can have that and more by producing a show or multiple shows. all you have to do is email us at thebusinessbehindsmallbusiness@gmail.com to express your interest, and we will share with you what you will receive with your investment. You'll have the opportunity to have your name and the name of your business mentioned multiple times on our show, having your company logo on our social media, along with details on how to get in touch with you and other marketing opportunities as well. Please support us so that we can continue supporting you. There's a saying that goes, put your money where your mouth is. And we're drilling down a bit further here to connect what we've discussed at a granular level to tangible sources you can take to get you to that next level. Got anything for us, Tiffany?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so much. No, you know what? I think as somebody who never really thought about business credit until like the past 12 months, I was dumbfounded by the amount of information there is out there. And rightfully so, because now that, if you listen to the episode, you realize, wow, this is nothing like your personal credit. And it is quite tricky to build your business credit, and it takes an amount of time. Maybe, maybe I've been living under a rock.
I felt the same way. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple things. So like I said, if you Google, if you YouTube it, there is quite a bit out there about people building business credit. The best Google search I've ever used is what vendors report to Equifax, what vendors report to Experian, what vendors report to Duns Bradstreet, and you'll get a list. And the only thing I would say is with some of these lists, sometimes vendors stop reporting. One thing I learned from Duns Bradstreet when I was speaking to them was the fact that some vendors kind of completely drop off because they get overwhelmed by and inundated by the amount of people applying to basically have a trade line with them, because they advertise the fact that they report to Duns Bradstreet, and they also get a lot of customer service negative feedback because people confuse with the fact that they're just reporting. They're not the ones in charge of how the credit is compiled. So if they feel like their credit is negative, they actually get mad at the vendor.
Interesting.
Yes. And so Duns Bradstreet said, for that reason, a lot of people just either just don't advertise anymore, or they stop reporting for whatever reason. Now, the reason not every vendor can report is because you actually have to have a certain volume in order for you to even qualify to report to any, and then you have to apply for it. And I'm sure there's fees and things that goes with it, which is why they also charge you a fee for working with them. But anyways, long story short is that you just want to make sure that the vendor still reports. So don't assume that if you go Google search it and it says, vendors as of 2023 that still reports to each of these credit bureaus. I would always do another search within that website or call that vendor just to make sure it does, because you don't want to miss out on a chance and spend time and spend money with that vendor, and then it's not going to build your credit for you.
Right.
So plenty of lists out there like that. We can put a few in the show notes just to get you started. And then as far as books, there was a couple books I read, which I cannot find on Amazon right now for whatever reason. But I did end up finding other ones that were on Kindle Unlimited. So Unlimited Kindle, so which is free if you were actually part of that membership. So there's the credit game. So the credit game is essentially, how to build credit without using your personal liability, and using your EIN. So essentially how to build your business credit. And then there's also the Insider's Guide to Business Credit using an EIN only. I think you guys see the pattern I'm going with here, right? Yeah. Yep. So plenty of books like that. The Bible to Business Credit. That's also another book that's out there, also well rated. So you'll see that there is just a plethora of items out there for somebody who is willing to dive in and understand how this business credit world works. Cool. And the last thing I would say about recommendations is, again, like I said, this thing takes time. There's no way you can hurry that timeline. You will need a minimum of 3 to 6 months. So if you feel like you need something like that in the near future, start today and start building your credit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hopefully you've begun to make goals for your company. And if any of those goals require you to make a large purchase, then start now.
Yeah, exactly.
As always, the resources I used are linked in the show notes. I also have a couple of other links I recommend. To take our advice a few steps further, I've listed a link from Dun Bradstreet and from the IRS on Duns numbers. I highly recommend you take the time to review those. I've also got a couple of books. Lewis Tappan and the Evangelical War Against Slavery by Bertram Wyatt Brown. Although Lewis Tappan was a small part of our story, he and his whole family are so fascinating. Do yourself a favor of reading about him. History of Credit and Power in the Western World by Scott B. McDonald examines the evolution of credit in the Western world and its relationship to power. And lastly, The Engine of Enterprise, Credit in America by Rowena Olegario. It traces the story of credit from colonial times to the present, highlighting its productive role in building national prosperity. I personally am a huge fan of looking at things and their butterfly effect, or looking at things from what it is in a very small view and how it is affecting us in a much larger view.
Universal.
Yeah, and those 3 books are fantastic books to get started with. And every resource I used for my stories, those will also be linked. So,
Excellent.
yes. And last but not least, please hit the like buttons and the follow buttons and tell all of your friends about us. Our show is on all of your preferred social media and podcast platforms and YouTube. We'd love for you to also share our episodes. All of our links are posted below. And until next time, mind the business behind your business, because all great successes start small.